Hey! So AMD recently launched their second generation Ryzen CPUs, on which I really wanted to make a video. So I reached out to the system builder, DinoPC, and asked them if they had a Ryzen 2 build that I could review. So this is the DinoPC Primal GSR gaming build, featuring AMD's new Ryzen 5 2600 CPU, which utilises their new Zen Plus 12nm architecture and has 6 cores and 12 threads, with a base clock of 3.4 GHz and a boost clock of 3.9 GHz. The build also features an AMD X470 chipset motherboard, the Asus Republic of Gamers Strix X470F. This wasn't the motherboard that the system was originally configured to have, and therefore doesn't really match the rest of the more kind of budget-conscious hardware, being more expensive than even the CPU. Despite this though, I still decided to be cheeky and asked for this upgrade from the original B350 chipset board, as B450 is not out yet and I really wanted to bring you a video on AMD's newest hardware. And I have to say that even if it doesn't quite fit the rest of the build, it really is a gorgeous board, with RGB lighting, some unique design elements, and a fabric tag that I love. So in regards to the other specs, we have a 16GB kit of 3000 MHz Corsair Vengeance LPX memory. 16GB I think is definitely the sweet spot for a gaming system right now. However, I'll actually be testing this system with the memory clocked at 2733 MHz instead, and I'll explain why later in the video. Then with the graphics card, this is an Inno3D 6GB GTX 1060. Visually, the card does look a little unimpressive, especially on this particular motherboard. Equally, I'd have to say that the build quality isn't the best either, not being on par with the more premium graphics card brands out there. And then hiding under the GPU, we have a 300 MB/s wireless end card. For the OS drive, DinoPC have installed a 256GB ADATA XPG SX6000 NVMe M.2 SSD under the motherboard's heatsink. And for additional storage, there's a 1TB Seagate Barracuda hard drive. So in regards to the cooling, for the CPU, the build is using an ID Cooling Auraflow 240 all-in-one, which utilises two 120mm RGB fans. I have to say that I'm actually impressed by just how high quality the cooler looks in person, especially given how low its price is compared to other all-in-one coolers on the market. And then intaking air in the bottom of the build, there's three 120mm RGB P7 F12 AeroCool fans. The whole build is powered by a cute little Corsair VS 650W 80+ rated power supply and is enclosed within an InWin 101 case, which despite only being around £60 has a gorgeous tempered glass side panel and both a modern yet also minimalistic and professional design. Whilst there are some small areas that I'm not too keen on with this case, overall I'd say I'm definitely a fan and I'd love to build in it in the future. Now before I move on to benchmarking and finding out how this system performs, I want to first take a look at how well the system's built overall. So starting with the cable management, I have to say that I honestly don't think it's possible for them to have done a better job with the chosen components. I mean, the longer I look, the more I appreciate it. Like for example, with the CPU cooler's fan cable, the way it wraps around the heatsink and under the motherboard's I/O cover, I can't see a better way to do that, and it's clear that some time and thought has gone into every cable. I mean, if I had any criticisms at all, it would be that I don't like being able to see these cables running past this hole here, but that's something very specific to this InWin case. So overall, I definitely rate DinoPC's cable management very highly, although it is somewhat wasted in my opinion on a power supply with such ugly rainbow cables. Moving on to lighting, with exception to the InWin 101's red power light, the rest of the lighting is RGB, which is all managed through the Asus AuraSync software. The 5 fans and pump have all been wired to a single RGB header on the motherboard. This makes creating a matching colour theme extremely easy, but does mean that you don't have individual lighting control of the individual components. Also, whilst I'm sure that my camera will do an awful job of picking this up properly, it is worth pointing out that there does seem to be a bit of colour variance between the various components. Entering the BIOS, you can see that with this specific build there is no pre-configured CPU overclock in place, although I'm sure DinoPC would have done so had I requested it. So everything is pretty much stock apart from the fan profiles and memory. As despite this build having a 3000 MHz memory kit installed, Out of the box, DinoPC had set the memory frequency to 2933 MHz, due to 3000 MHz not being stable, and I can concur, finding that this build wouldn't even post at that frequency. However, I also found 2933 MHz to be an unstable frequency, with it not even being able to get past the 12-minute mark in Asus 64. Now, in fairness to DinoPC, in trying to get the system to run at 3000 MHz, I did both update and downgrade the BIOS version, which may have affected stability. They did assure me that the build passed a full day of stability testing before it was dispatched. But despite that, I found that even with the same BIOS revision and identical settings, it just wasn't stable for me. I'm not completely ruling out the possibility of the instability being unrelated to memory, as there have been recent issues with the April Windows update and some NVMe SSDs. I really do wish that I could have 100% gotten to the bottom of this, but just unfortunately I only had a limited amount of time with the system before it needed to go back, so I wasn't able to. But anyway, for the benchmarks, I'll be running the memory at 2733 MHz at its stock timings, as that proved most stable for me, passing the 6-hour mark in Asus 64. So on to running some gaming benchmarks. Now unfortunately, I don't have any relevant hardware to be able to do comparative benchmarking, but did my best to try to give you at least a rough idea of the type of performance this system provides in this configuration. And as you can see, for most newer AAA titles, this is very much a 1080p 60fps gaming rig. Even if you drop the graphical settings down, 1440p and definitely 4K is going to be a struggle, as is higher refresh rate gaming. This won't be true for all titles though, and you may be able to get above 1080p 60fps in less demanding or particularly well optimised games. This is actually my first time testing with 1% and 0.1% lows as a means of showing the worst frame rates, so a shout out to Scott Wasson and Gamers Nexus for popularising this methodology. Next up, I ran Cinebench, which gave me a score of 1267, and 3D Mark, which gave me a score of 4341 in TimeSpy. And then I took a look at the speed of the drives, which showed that the ADATA NVMe SSD is significantly faster than standard SATA-based SSDs, making it a great option for the operating system, applications, and your most played games. But the hard drive, on the other hand, is just, as slow as you'd expect for a hard drive. It is only a 1TB drive, and I think I'd personally either upgrade to a much larger hard drive or just ditch it altogether and get a single higher capacity SSD instead. So on to cooling performance. The GTX 1060 stayed at around 63 degrees Celsius whilst under load, and the Ryzen 5 2600 sits at about 25 degrees whilst idle and reached a temperature of 68 degrees after an hour of stress testing. One concern that I did have was that without a rear exhaust fan, the motherboard's VRM area might become a bit of an airflow dead zone. But actually, I found that the power supply with its always on fan does a really good job of keeping air moving in that area. So overall, I have no worries about cooling performance with this build. In terms of the build's noise level though, in my subjective opinion, the build is actually quite loud. Whilst DinoPC have configured the fans in the BIOS to the quiet setting, I think it's the model of fans used, combined with the power supply and hard drive, which make for a much louder system than I would personally like. So then finally, concluding all of my thoughts. Firstly, should you buy a PC from DinoPC? In my opinion, yes. If you're looking to get a new PC and don't want to build it yourself for whatever reason, then I would absolutely recommend them to you. This is actually the third system that I've seen from them now, and despite running into a couple of issues unique to this system, I've always been impressed by just how well the builds are put together, especially the cable management. However, when it comes to should you buy this PC, the Primal GSR, I unfortunately have a hard time recommending it. Whilst, as it is a well-built, well-rounded PC that looks great, I just personally wouldn't want to spend over £1,200 plus on a mostly 1080p 60fps gaming experience. I think that had I been configuring this PC, my part selection would be very different to the direction that DinoPC have taken, as I would personally be looking to put a much higher percentage of the budget into the GPU. Now, this would of course mean compromising in other areas to keep the price the same, but I do think that it's possible to build a system with this budget that has at least a GTX 1070 in it, even whilst keeping the Ryzen 5 2600 and 16GB of DDR4, especially with the currently falling GPU prices. And then finally, what do I think of second generation Ryzen? Potential memory clock speed issues aside, if I was going to be buying a PC today, then I think there would be a good chance that I would go down the AMD route, as I'm a big fan of what AMD have been doing with Ryzen. However, I can't unfortunately make any definitive recommendations for you without first comparing Ryzen 2 to what Intel has to offer. So yeah, if you like this video, then please hit the like button. If you want to see more of my videos and haven't already, then please don't forget to subscribe, or perhaps consider becoming a patron. And thank you for watching.